In November 2001, the Anti-Taliban forces of Afghanistan's Northern Alliance, which had the backing of the United States and other Western countries, had halted on the city outskirts, and the Taliban had simply run for it. 5 years of the most extreme religious dictatorship in recent times were over. Under the Taliban, Afghanistan had become a black hole in which all sorts of extremism could thrive. Only 2 months earlier, the 9/11 attacks on New York and Washington had been planned and guided by Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda movement. It simply never occurred to anyone that the Taliban could make a comeback. Now, of course, everyone is looking for reasons. They aren't hard to find. The government of Afghanistan, two post-Taliban's presidents Hamid Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, were democratically elected but never strong, and corruption was the system which worked best. Nevertheless, the President Ghani would still be in his palace and the army would be driving around in its expensive Western vehicles if Donald Trump had not decided that he needed a foreign policy success before the 2020 election. He thought that bringing the long-running war to an end will achieve that. Several Afghanistan politicians and journalists were horrified by the conclusion of the US talks with the Taliban. Political leaders in Doha on February 2020, and doubly so when President Joe Biden made it clear that he was going to stick to it. Directly after the US, British and other Western troops began pulling out, the Taliban fighters across Afghanistan made their play for power. Reports of prisoners being executed brought an atmosphere of blind panic in one town after another until Kabul itself succumbed and officials and soldiers were battling their way to the airport to get out. But what sort of country will Taliban controlled Afghanistan be this time? The only guide that was known was the 5 years period from 1996, when again in a matter of few days, that's how these things go in Afghanistan, the Taliban drove out the moderate Mujahideen's government controlled by the redoubtable Ahmad Shah Massoud. Sharia law in its fiercest form was in operation everywhere, with public executions, stonning and whippings commonplace. Gangs of vigilantes hunt out on street corners, attacking men who showed their ankles or wore any form of Western clothing. Women only ventured out if they had a written permission from men, and of course had to wear the all-encompassing Burka. The Taliban Minister of Health, Mullah Baluk, complained that the International Red Cross refused his request to provide surgeons to cut off the hands and feet of convicted thieves. So he had to do the job personally, though he seemed to quite enjoy it. Working for television was a nightmare because taking the image of any living creature was expressly forbidden on religious grounds. Bookshops were regularly ransacked by illustrations, and any guilty bookseller was whipped. Most people fled the city if they could, and most shops were shut up. The Taliban couldn't pay for oil imports, so the brightest lights at nighttime were the candles people put in their windows, and the loudest noise was the barking of packs of marauding dogs abandoned by their owners. For all the failings and of successes Afghanistan governments and their western backers Kabul over the city have burst with commercial lives since Taliban were chased out. Living standards have shot up, cars parked the once empty streets, schools have blossomed, especially for girls under the Taliban. The education of girls was expressly forbidden. Music banned under the Taliban, bled out everywhere. There are new buildings everywhere. Most Afghan will regard the Taliban takeover as a catastrophe for themselves and their country. The main question now is, will the Taliban followers follow their instincts and take Afghan back to the past as radically as they did before Liberation Day 20 years ago? Or have they learned their lesson